Thank you, Prashant, for these kind words and for this introduction. You have really elaborated it a lot. I must say that I have been fortunate in lot of aspects during my career, um, and today it's a pleasure for me to share some of my experiences and share the excitement of the journey that I had a chance to carry on during my life. So, as I um, begin with this sentence, the journey is more beautiful than the destination. And basically, this talk is really unlike any other talk. I probably have never presented a talk like this before because it's more about it's scientific conversation, but still more towards the journey into science rather than showing the results or mainly introducing a hypothesis and showing how it was carried out, but how it was actually how it was a part of one's life. So, with this reflection on my academic journey, when I was presenting this or when I was preparing this presentation, I had a chance to reflect on this journey, and this also was it also appeared like an opportunity to relive some of the very cherished moments actually that came and that time, and now it seems like 10 years ago, but when you see those or when you think about those things, it still feels like a thing of yesterday. It's also is an occasion for expressing gratitude because it was uh, due to the help of some people were part of this journey, some really helped it, and some really were crucial in making those things happen. And with that, it's I also see this as an opportunity to connect with um, other people through this platform. So yes, with that, I'm just giving some glimpse into the career progression. And the early career that I had was from Rajasthan in Banswara district. I had my education till graduation in that uh, district only. It's the southernmost district of Rajasthan. Just the yeah the southernmost most district, so easy to identify on the map of Rajasthan. And in 1990, I got a chance to get enrolled in Navodaya, Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalaya, and I consider that this was the most important thing in my career that happened to me actually. That really helped me in growing into what I wanted to become or what I am today. So I like to think that I have three parents, and one of that is this Navodaya Vidyalaya that really nurtured us from the age of 10 years till so from standard 6 to standard 12. So that had played a very important role in my life, and the teachers actually who used to sacrifice their personal lives for taking care of 300 children in a campus, all from age 10 to 18. So that's really a different feeling. And sure, most people who have finished their education from there, they always feel bonded to their school even till today. And whenever there is an opportunity to gather through an alumni or to participate in some of the activity of Navodaya Vidyalaya, they always try to avail that. So, and during my schooling also, I was always interested in participating in different co-curricular activities. Uh, One reason for participating in those activities was that sometimes you get a chance to visit new places. For example, if there is a cluster level um, tournament, and if you have done well in your school level activities, you have a chance to present your work or to play or to participate in some science exhibition. in another school. So there you would get to know new people, you would get to see new place. So that was the biggest charm in school time, and that is why I also participated in this NCC. Uh, if you can find, if you can try to find Prime Minister Modi in this picture, um, if you try to do that, you would not be able to find it because he's not there. And surely I didn't study with him in the school. Um, if you can see my cursor, it's this. It's me in 1992. So almost 29 years ago from today in Udaipur. And one of the biggest reason to participate in NCC was actually that you get to participate in this type of NCC camps and get to see new places. So that has been a biggest charm. And recently, only last year, there was alumni meet, and you can see the same people who are seated in the front row are now being welcomed in the school as the alumni, and there is another uh, generation of NCC cadets hosting them. So that's wonderful actually to see. I was not able to go to that alumni meet, but uh, I was shared those pictures by my friends. So after my BSc from Banswara district, I got a chance to complete MSc in biotechnology from Agra, and during and I I was lucky enough to get CSIR and ICMR JRF fellowship, and with that I joined Dr. VM Katoj. Actually, we were very lucky during our MSc time. Also, we were taught from ICMR Jalma, and though at that time those scientists were taking our classes at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. in the morning, because as a scientist they have to discharge, they have to carry on their other activities because it was not a university setup. So they used to take our classes at 7 a.m. and for that we had to come from other corner of the city at 6 a.m. So that also was crucial actually in shaping our career. If they had not sacrificed some hours of their rest, certainly we would not have achieved that level of education or training in practicals. And I'm really grateful to all those teachers, Dr. Mohanty Madam, Dr. VM Katoj, Dr. Venkateshan, Dr. Yuri Gupta. They all have actually taken a lot of interest in shaping our lives and career. So during the master's thesis itself, I got interested in antimicrobial resistance in mycobacteria, uh, and I was allotted a topic on paragenamide resistance in tuberculosis. And I saw one paper published in journal using Bacti alert system. So I also planned some experiments along the same way, and my PhD supervisor suggested to submit it to Journal of Clinical Microbiology, and I was not sure that it would be publishable there because the other paper based on which I had designed my study was published in a very low impact or very small uh, journal. So, but I still tried, and it was very good decision and very good suggestion from my PhD supervisor. It got accepted, and actually that paper helped me in getting a postdoc position in Professor Stuart Cole's lab, who was at that time relocating from Institut Pasteur in Paris, and in 2006 he was about to relocate to Switzerland at the EPFL in Lausanne. So during some interactions in meetings and organizing certain conferences, I had a chance to interact with Professor Stuart Cole, and when he moved to Lausanne in Switzerland from Pasteur Institute, he had to create a new group, and that is how actually the openings came up. And being ready with a PhD at that time and having interacted with him during conferences certainly helped me. So I think it is for the PhD students, it's actually very good to be aware where they want to go and to keep in touch uh, with those scientists, because you never know what type of interaction can can make a direction for your career, which will certainly be different if that event didn't take place or if you were not able to interact at that time. So during my PhD, I was working on tuberculosis drug resistance, and in Professor Stuart Cole's lab, he invited me to work on the genomics of leprosy bacilli, and I moved to Switzerland from Agra. Just the next day of my PhD defense, I had to join in his lab in Lausanne. There I worked for 6 years, nearly 6 years, and this is actually a multifaceted institute because it's equivalent to IITs in our country, because it's not only for life sciences but for all other fields of science, just like in IITs. And its English translation itself is actually Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. So that time I started working on leprosy, and many people even at that time used to believe that leprosy is more of a historical disease. It's no longer of public health importance. But at that time also, when you gathered those figures, near, more than 2 lakh new cases are recorded worldwide. And this figure has not changed significantly in last 10 years. It has still remained that high. The new case detection remain very high. And of that, two-thirds of the cases are in India. And that also has not changed in 10 years. And traditionally, that was believed that India is also the origin of leprosy. So I am briefly presenting about one of the study that we were able to conduct in Professor Stuart Cole's lab by investigating leprosy strains from all over the world. So the traditional hypothesis at that time was that since leprosy is also very common in India, and its oldest records are also from India from 2000 BC. In Sushruta Samhita, in 600 BC in Sushruta Samhita, it is mentioned, its symptoms are mentioned, its treatment using Cholmugra oil was also very clearly described. So it was often believed that leprosy originated in India, and with Alexander's army, it went to Europe in around 300 BC. But while investigating these samples from all over the world, we found that the strains which are prevalent in India are very different from what was present in Europe around 1000 years ago. Using the ancient DNA samples from Europe, we compared samples from all over the world, because there is no leprosy in Europe currently. So it was studied through ancient DNA material from the leprosy skeletons. We will see some of the slides later on. And we found that it was actually not the same strains. Instead, Europe got leprosy probably from Silk Road through China, and it was from Europe that the leprosy went to USA through colonialism in around 1600th century or 16th century. So after that, we were investigating the leprosy in armadillos. So there is natural infection of leprosy reported in these animals, and these armadillos are very commonly used as a food source also in certain parts, and they are used for making souvenirs. And it was known that they carry leprosy as a natural infection. But whether the people handling them are getting the same strains or not, that was not very clearly defined. So we investigated by whole genome sequencing. We found that the armadillo strains and the human strains were exactly identical even at the genome level. And that was a very strong evidence. Again, I could recall that conversation with Professor Stuart Cole, that when we saw those results, he said that this is significant evidence and let's submit this manuscript uh, fast to New England Journal of Medicine. And I thought that uh, it- it's um, it's probably it would not get accepted there, but the vision that he had at that time was very clear, and this was actually accepted by New England Journal with some hesitation initially. So they suggested us to use a word probable zoonotic leprosy in southern United States, and we were okay with that suggestion of the editor. But we kept on working on this, and later on we found that the strains in other parts of USA, for example, in Florida, were also carrying the same strains. And this was then published in Emerging Infectious Diseases. And at that time, nobody asked us to use the probable genetic uh, association. So it actually got confirmed by strong molecular evidence at the genome level identity. And later on, we were curious to investigate how leprosy in Europe declined in 14th century without any vaccine or drug. So, with the collaboration with archaeologists and historians, we were able to get some samples which were having osteological evidence of leprosy in those samples, and by whole genome sequencing approaches. So, there were that was a challenging study to sequence entire genome of leprosy bacilli, but using the expertise of ancient DNA researchers in Tübingen in Germany and in our lab, we were able to get whole genome sequences of uh, several skeleton samples, and those were compared with the modern samples, and it was identified that the armadillo sample and the skeleton sample are almost identical at the genome level. There were only 28 differences in a genome of more than 3 million bases. You only see 28 differences, 21 here and 7 SNPs here. So that actually proved that those are the same strains which were present in the Europe and around 14th to 15th century. And it also proved that leprosy decline in Europe was not due to loss of strain virulence in medieval Europe. It was probably because of some host genetic or demographic factors, or the combination of both. So that was published in Science in 2013, and that was also a wonderful study. Actually, it got a good coverage in the media because most people can associate with it. But we, though we investigated 1,000 years of samples, we couldn't find any other species or difference in M. leprae strains. So, is it the only species associated with leprosy? And for that, we investigated a different presentation of leprosy from Mexico. There is a unique clinical presentation leading to those loss of blood supply in limbs, basically, and the whole genome of this bacteria was sequenced, and it was found to be a different species, Mycobacterium lepromatosis. That was published in PNAS. Again, all those investigations required sequencing in a way that the human DNA is removed first, because otherwise you would not get enough coverage of bacterial DNA. So for that, enrichment assays were designed, and using capture based assays, we captured the DNA of our interest, but using the reference genome of Mycobacterium leprae. But since it is a new species, that a positive capture approach of using M. leprae DNA as a bait was not a possibility, because it's a new genome. We don't know what to use for its capture. So we thought of an idea that why not remove the human DNA, and whatever is left, that would be giving us the answer about the genome. And we used that approach. We depleted human DNA, and it gave a sufficient coverage of Mycobacterium lepromatosis genome, and which was found to be very similar to Mycobacterium lepri, but they have been separated for more than 14 million years. So even before the modern humans actually came into existence, those have been two separate species. But for the last 150 years, we have been thinking that the both type of diseases of leprosy are caused by the same bacteria, but that was also not the case. And later on, this Mycobacterium lepromatosis was also found in red squirrels in United Kingdom, where it has been where there have been no case of leprosy in last 300 or 400 years. Those squirrels still carry lepromatosis and Mycobacterium lepri also. So though this is the benefit of genomics approaches. Once you have identified a new genome, you can design the specific primers, and using a simple PCR assay, you can identify that species in unsuspected hosts, such as these red squirrels, being which were actually being investigated to for for the certain viral diseases in these population, but we also found the evidence of Mycobacterium lepri as well as Mycobacterium lepromatosis. And recently, Mycobacterium lepri has been found in primates also, in chimpanzees in African country. So all these became possible because of the genomics. And while the lepromatosis genome was described, it was annotations were transferred from the existing genomes. And later on, very recently, a postdoc in our lab, Dr. Mukul Sharma, has joined. He had a close look at the genome of this, what we had annotated in 2015. He looked at some of the specific genomes of Mycobacterium lepromatosis, specific genes, and one of that is HAM-N gene. When he looked the sequences closely, he found that it is more similar to HAM-W. So it was a misannotation not only in Mycobacterium lepri or lepromatosis, but also in all other mycobacterial genomes. So this was also corrected recently. Only last month, this paper has came out in Infection Genetics and Evolution. Another simple study was the designing of specific primers which can detect both the species in just one simple PCR, and by the fragment size it can also differentiate them. So that also came last month only. It's still in press actually, it's published online. So this is basically the current lab members in our institute at ICMR NIRTS Jabalpur. The work that I introduced about lepromatosis HAM-N gene was carried out primarily by Dr. Mukul Sharma. He also designed those. He also helped in identifying the specific region which can detect lepri and lepromatosis simultaneously. And along with Purna, both of them carried out this work. Afjal and Anuj are experienced bioinformatician in our lab, and Mr. Purushottam Patel helps with technical work. There is one intern also currently, Isharjan. So in our lab, mostly the work is on mycobacterial genomics and phylogeny. But since we are designing those approaches of enrichment of DNA, so that we don't have to depend on the culture. Mycobacterium lepri and lepromatosis both are not culturable organisms, so we have to design enrichment assays. Now we are adapting those enrichment assays for other pathogens, so that we can sequence their genome without depending on culture. And we are using those approaches for scrub typhus and other pathogens also now. And using the power of genomics, we are planning to investigate certain loci in bacteria, which can then be adapted into simple molecular diagnostics or field-friendly assays, which can be carried out in peripheral laboratories also. So currently, I am working at ICMR National Institute of Research in Tribal Health. And lot of this work involves field visits, collecting samples from the field, and making the people aware about disease, its symptoms, its treatment, and even to bring diagnostics to their doorsteps, and to bridge them with the treatment options, or to provide even the basic medications wherever necessary, in guidance of clinicians. And that is why the point of care diagnostics would be helpful, so that a person can be directly diagnosed at their home itself, or at least for screening purposes. Uh, and during this journey, I also had a chance to do certain transformations actually. When I joined at MSU in Vadodara, uh, we were a given a task to transform this room into a functional lab space, because this has been empty for after retirement of some professors. So that is why it was made available to us, and we were lucky enough to transform it into a very functional and quite. You can see that in 2016, this is the same frame actually, and this was possible through some of the grant mechanisms. For example, there is seeding lab grant which provides instrument. Through the instrument access grant, we were able to get one container full of around 100 functional instruments, and that helped us equip our lab very quickly. uh, in 2019, I got selected in ICMR, so I had to do the same thing again here, but we are now fortunate to transform a empty store space into a functional lab again. It's actually still requiring a lot of instrumentation or other things, but we are able to conduct most of our experiments in our lab itself now. So all this was not possible without the funding support from different funding agencies, including DBT Ramalinga Swamy Fellowship, that enabled my re-entry from USA to MS University of Baroda, and from there to Jabalpur in ICMR NIRT. And this is also possible because of the team members who have always very enthusiastically contributed in these works, and the scientists and colleagues at MSU as well as at uh, ICMR NIRT. And certainly without the support of family, and they have all witnessed this journey all this while. During one such visit, I can see a generation before me and after me playing together. And I mentioned about co-curricular activities. In Lausanne, I got interested in participating in these marathon events, and that was also actually a lot of fun. And I was mentioning about the Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalaya. We conducted some science day activities there last year. So yes, this is all from my side for today. And I would be happy if you have certain anything, any feedback or any questions. Thank you. Thank you for your kind word. As I said from the very beginning, I find myself very lucky. I have actually been lucky to work with some uh, wonderful people. For example, Dr. V.M. Katoj, he always used to work so hard and he never thought of his own comfort or whatever comes easy for him. He would always be basically working very hard, going out of his way actually to help uh, 20 students at a time. And similarly, in my postdoctoral training also, I found Professor Stuart Cole to be so approachable actually. He would know everybody's family, everybody's home conditions, and he would actually take personal interest not only in the academic work, but he would basically care for everybody. And the encouragement that these people actually showed, that was very helpful in as a good training for me. After coming to India, the one big motivation that I had was that since I had this wonderful opportunity to meet good people, to be in very productive labs, why not actually take this opportunity to come back to India and probably help others achieve their potential. For example, the diagnostic is one of the challenge that we want to undertake. If we can detect a disease, even using some basic infrastructure available in the field settings, that would really transform lives of people living in remote areas, for example, the tribal populations. And the unachieved potential of the students, that interaction with them is my biggest motivation actually. Some of those, and actually I believe that all of those would be in doing wonderful work in their life, and I would feel proud to be associated with them at some point. So that is one of my biggest motivation. Yes, yes, yes. Mhm, mhm. Okay. So actually, it was found accidentally only that they carry natural infection of leprosy, and they have low body temperature. Mycobacterium leprae likes low body temperature because during its reductive evolution, it has accumulated more than 1,000 pseudogenes, and one of the system that has got lost from its genome is heat shock proteins. So it cannot, it basically likes low body temperature. That is why the periphery of the human body is more likely to be involved. For example, the peripheral nervous system, hands, uh, oropharyngeal mucosa, and probably the low body temperature of my armadillo and certain characteristic of its immune response might make it more vulnerable for attack of leprosy once they are infected. You are right that they have hard um, yeah, shell, but it's actually the internal organs where they have billions and billions of bacilli multiplying, because even in the liver and pancreas they can have multiplication in these animals. Yes, true. Yeah. I think in last few years, after lot of new genomes have become available, lot of new microbacterial pathogens also have been actually uncovered, and the annotations are gradually improving. Actually, the first microbacterial genome that was sequenced was Mycobacterium TB. That was in 1998. At the time, only 10 other genomes were sequenced actually. So the annotations were not very mature at that time. But since then, lot of times it has been that the annotations were simply transferred, and those are currently improving. I think there is lot more scope now, and there is lot more potential to provide some function to those hypothetical proteins based on the comparative genomics itself. And of course, the proteomics and structural genomics can further add to that. Those could certainly be good targets because if you prove that those are essential genes, those could even if they are uh, hypothetical proteins, those could still serve as a good target. Yeah. Um, it's not a culturable organism actually. So you have to depend on the animal passage to get enough bacilli, and even that you would have certain contamination of the host proteins and DNA in the material, and it's actually even doesn't survive the freezing. It's not that you can grow them and keep them in freezers because it has to be even transported at wet ice, not in dry ice. If it is frozen once, it would not actually grow again. And its multiplication time is so slow, it divides in 14 days actually. So whatever amount that you can obtain would actually be posing a lot of challenges. Besides, there is a decline in the leprosy research in last few years. A lot of laboratories have stopped working on uh, mycobacterial leprosy. Uh, Many animal passage facilities have closed. So that is another concern. The only facility that is providing viable laboratories in Baton Rouge, and that also we don't know until when they would be able to do that. False positive from the DNA based tests. You can say that a person is detected by a test, but that person doesn't have leprosy. But it we can say that they do not have the clinical symptoms yet, or they may recover by themselves. But for in terms of identifying the possible source of transmission, it would be still be good to identify such cases. So the DNA based diagnostic itself is very specific. It would not be falsely positive. Only thing is that they may not yet have any clinical symptoms. The major concern is about the false negative, because in early stages you don't know where to take the sample from, where to take the biopsy, whether from this site or from this site. So if you sample a wrong site, you would have false negative, uh, even though the person is progressing to disease. That is why the host gene expression based transcriptome biomarker are being investigated currently. Mhm. So yes, there have been, in just last few years there have been two FDA approved vaccines. One is discovered by Dr. GP Talwar. Its name is Mycobacterium indicus pranae. Uh, it involves Pran, the middle name of Dr. GP Talwar, and NII is the place where he was actually investigating it. So that has been found to act as an immunomodulator, because a lot of leprosy patients do not have any immune system to fight back leprosy. Even after the treatment, they remain susceptible again. So, in order to train their immunity, this Mycobacterium indicus pranae acts as an immunomodulator. Other one is LabVax, that is based on the recombinant antigens of Mycobacterium leprae. Both have been actually investigated, but as such, no program is actually administering those for routine applications. It's clinicians actually judgment. Um, I haven't actually come across such type of studies, but uh, certainly a would metagenomic investigation would be much more helpful, because instead of looking sequentially what pathogen it may be, a metagenomic investigation can certainly be helpful. Um, if you can provide some more detail, I would certainly be interested, because India is such a hyper-endemic country for leprosy, and there is no animal reservoir so far properly investigated.
Uh, Excuse me, can I?
Yes,
Yeah, actually, I meant that if squirrels that you saw, red squirrels were carrying the bacteria, mycobacterium, and similarly, they were actually looking for viruses that you mentioned.
yes,
So I was wondering that here people are looking for bats for different kind of viruses as
yes.
carrier. So maybe there's a lot of squirrels around. So I was just wondering if anybody has looked the other carriers.
Mhm. So actually,
I have
this
not gone through the literature though. I would like.
I'm not aware of that actually, but the region that there were two species of squirrels in England, red squirrels and the brown squirrels. The population of red squirrels was declining after the introduction of brown squirrels, and it was assumed that the brown squirrels carried some pox virus was that was responsible for decline in the uh, population of red squirrels. But during that time, they also found certain lesions on their ear pinna, and they found that it is full of mycobacterium, and it was not Mycobacterium leprae. And then, using the primer that was described from the Mycobacterium lepromatosis genome, they were able to identify that it is actually another species. Later on, they also identified Mycobacterium leprae also, and that remained there in last 600 years without being suspected, without being investigated. So I think surely if there is certain observation of decline in a population of particular species, uh, it should be investigated from multiple angles. And for that, a metagenomic investigation or microbiome related investigations would be helpful. Uh, if there is anything from our side, we can contribute in terms of the experimental investigation, we would be happy.
Thank you, Dr. Pushpendra.
So basically, there are a lot of openings in the projects in different places. So if I understood it correctly, if there is no fellowship available, how to actually enter into the research? Is that what is the question? So certainly there is type of different type of projects in research institutes where you are interested can be the entry point, and I would maybe take this opportunity to provide such information in our lab also. We have opening for project research assistant and two senior research fellows. So you can look at the websites of the institutes where you are interested in. Currently, in our institute also there are three openings: two for SRF and one for JRF. Um, Sorry, can you please repeat? So macrophage activation can help in killing leprosy. This is what is the question?
So,
Yes, please. Can you?
okay, sir. Actually, what my question is, like normally what happens, like they will take up this particular bacteria from the periphery and they will commit to the secondary lymphoid organ, and where they are exposed to the, where they will present it to CD4 T cells. Now, CD4 T cells will try to secrete different kind of cytokines that will activate the macrophages, and in that condition, they are much better killer of the bacteria when compared to earlier states. So can we modulate these antigen presenting cells a bit more so that they could able to kill this mycobacterium?
Okay. So basically, from what I have understood from my work and from your question, basically the biggest strategy that mycobacteria use is to remain latent inside macrophages for a long time, or they basically do not get presented to by the antigen presenting cell because they can avoid the fusion of phagolysosome, and that is how basically they use macrophages as the for hiding for several months actually. So if one can basically uh, enable an approach which doesn't allow which facilitates the phagosome lysosome fusion, that can be actually helpful for its presentation through antigen presenting cell. I can only probably add to that uh, only that much, but is it closer to what you wanted?
Yes, sir. That's okay. Thank you, sir.
Mhm. Yes, true. You are you have actually touched upon a very important point. Uh, Actually, the other component is host genetics actually. So I am just trying to open one slide because that would be much easier to show. Let me just- So TLR1 polymorphisms have been found to be associated with protection against leprosy. And I hope you are able to see the slide now. Yes. So in 2000 itself, there was this paper describing that there is one particular SNP in TLR1 gene. Isoleucine is converted into serine at 602 amino acid, and when it is a serine, this is actually providing significant protection. And an ancestral allele is isoleucine, which is also present in other species. For example, sheep, mouse, chicken, they all carry isoleucine at this position. But certain human populations have evolved to get a serine in this position. Once there is a serine at this position, those TLR receptors do not express on the surface. So those are basic. So TLR1 and TLR2 heterodimer doesn't get formed and ex- doesn't express itself on the surface uh, of those individuals. And those TLR related signaling is favorable for mycobacteria. So for mycobacterial survival, this mycobacteria is using those TLR signaling for its survival by dampening the immune response. So basically, I am showing here that in European population, you have nearly two-third of the nearly one-third of the population is carrying these. Sorry, two-third of the population is carrying the protective allele, whereas in Asia and in Africa, this protective allele is almost absent. So this population differentiation could be one of the factor actually in European population that it didn't. So once this has been actually selected because of certain factors such as the plague or tuberculosis around 13th to 14th century might have contributed in selection of this TLR polymorphism in European population, and the European American have again higher frequency of this allele compared to the African American. So this has been actually very wonderfully investigated, and its biochemical basis also has been described in detail. So host genetics could be a very important factor actually. So nutrition is certainly is very important factor actually. But for infectious disease, you need to have infection source, and then the outcome can depend on the host immunity, host nutrition, and some component could be host genetics also. Uh-huh. Mhm. Mhm. Sure. Mhm. 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 So I think I'm in last few years. I think I have lost this art actually. Um, I used to be, since you touched upon this actually, and I was reflecting on my journey, and maybe we can take maybe another 5 minutes to discuss this. Hopefully, not nobody's in. So I never used to had any complaints when I went for my first postdoc, or even during my PhD time also. Basically, I had not mastered the art of complaining by then, or I used to rarely complain about anything, and that time I used to be happy for no reason. So, but gradually, as I aged, I acquired the art of complaining, uh, art of identifying faults in others, and and that actually gradually led to more and more disagreements. Actually, upon coming back to in India, again there were some occasions where I would be not agreeing to certain things because clearly to me it appeared like it is a waste of time or unnecessary, but then there is a hierarchy that has to be followed. Uh, so I would say that impulsive nature is not really helpful for anything. Uh, Sometimes when I look back now, I realize that that type of reaction was not at that moment not needed actually. I know that it is wrong, but it let me tell this that the point of winning an argument is there is no point in winning the argument if you lose the person. Disagreements are not permanent actually, and maybe there is a more subtle way of doing it or saying it later on rather than so I would say that किसी को निरुत्तर करना आपके तर्क की विजय नहीं होगी अगर आप उसको सहमत कर लेते हैं अपने तर्क से दैट इज योर विन ना केवल ना उनको निरुत्तर करना हमारा उद्देश्य नहीं होना चाहिए उन्हें सहमत करना हमारा उद्देश्य होना चाहिए अगर वो है तो एंड इट्स रियली no point in winning all the arguments, especially with your seniors, because they may have a different perspective. Today, I also do certain things that my postdoc supervisor used to do with me. He would not like certain part of my article that I had written that way, and I see this type of observation in my capacity today also. So I can now relate it more clearly. So we have to probably think that we don't have that vision at present. As a student, sometimes we may have our own viewpoint, but we don't have the viewpoint of our superior in that moment. So we should probably give some benefit of doubt sometimes to others. Oh. No, it's my pleasure. I want to be as hardworking as him actually, and I will be his student always. And I hope that I can contribute to the same level for my students as he did for me and for all his students. Yeah, that would be wonderful. No, thank you very much. Thank you. It's really a pleasure. Thank you for your time also. Thank you very much thank you. Yeah. And let's stay in touch. I can be contacted at I'm sending my email. Thank you very much. Bye for now and stay safe and take care. Thank you very much.